I was halfway through grading midterms when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. It was Friday, and after a week of teenagers asking if they could redo their essays for the fourth time, I wasn't in the mood for surprises. But something made me pick up. "Hi, is this Melissa Hart?" A bright, chirpy voice asked. "Yes. This is Jennifer Adams from Elm Tree Realty. Just calling to confirm your mailing address for the seller's documents. Congratulations on the closing." I blinked. "I'm sorry. The closing of what?" "The sale of your property at 122 Willow Lane. It finalized this morning. Your brother Ethan signed on your behalf. We just need your address to send the packet and final disbursement details." For a moment, the world stopped. The walls of my classroom seemed to close in the rows of empty desks blurring into a fog. I clutched the phone tighter. "I didn't authorize any sale," I said slowly. "That house was left to both of us. Ethan doesn't have the right to sell it without my consent." There was a pause. A paper shuffle. Well, your brother provided power of attorney documents. They seemed in order." I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. The next call I made was to Ethan, straight to voicemail. I stared at the screen, heart-pounding hands trembling. The house. Our house. Dad's house. The home I grew up in with the creaky floorboards that sang when you stepped into the kitchen. The porch swing Dad built by hand. The small burn mark on the windowsill from the time I tried to light a candle for atmosphere at age 12. Gone. I grabbed my coat and left school early. I needed answers. I needed a plan. But mostly I needed to stop myself from falling apart. I drove 2 hours straight to the old place past pine trees that lined the winding road into Hart's Point. That was the name of our lakefront town, where the mountains hugged the water and the tourists came for fall foliage, but left before the snow buried everything until April. As I turned onto Willow Lane, my breath caught in my throat. There it was. The white clapboard siding, the dark green shutters, the garden Dad used to prune every Sunday. But now a slick for sale, sold sign was planted in the lawn like a dagger. My stomach dropped. Ethan's sleek black Tesla was parked in the gravel driveway, a stark contrast to the worn red pickup truck Dad had driven until the end. I marched up the steps and banged on the door. He opened it with a smile like nothing was wrong. "Lissy. Didn't expect you until next week." "Don't lissy me," I snapped. "You sold the house." He leaned against the doorframe, cool as ever. "It was the smart move. Market's hot. I found a buyer who paid over asking. We're sitting on gold, sis." I stared at him speechless. He added, "You'll get your cut, of course, once everything's processed." "Cut." My voice cracked. "This isn't some stock portfolio. This is Dad's house. You had no right." "I had every right," he said, suddenly colder. "Power of attorney. You were always too sentimental about this place. Dad left us a mess. I'm just cleaning it up." That's when it hit me. He never understood what this house meant. To him it was just equity, a line on a balance sheet. But for me, this was the last piece of our father that hadn't been taken by illness time or grief. "You forged the POA, didn't you?" I said softly, almost a whisper. His eyes flickered. Just for a second. Then the smile returned. "Don't be dramatic." But I knew, and suddenly I remembered something. 3 weeks before Dad passed, he'd called me into the tool shed behind the house. He looked so frail in the sunlight, his skin paper-thin, voice barely above a whisper. He pressed something into my palm. "If things ever feel wrong, go see Carol Jennings," he said. "She knows what to do." At the time, I thought it was about funeral arrangements or maybe the trust paperwork. But now I was starting to understand. Ethan may have sold the house, but maybe Dad had seen this coming. Back at my apartment, I dug through the top drawer of my desk and pulled out the envelope Dad had given me. I hadn't opened it. It was sealed in wax, his neat handwriting across the front. "For Melissa, when it matters most." My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a short letter. 1 paragraph. "Lissy, if you're reading this, it means Ethan has crossed a line. I tried to believe the best of him, but I had to protect what I knew mattered most to you and to me. Carol holds the key. Trust her. Love, Dad." I picked up the phone and dialed. Carol Jennings's office, the receptionist answered. "I need to speak with her." "Tell her. Melissa Hart is calling." And it matters now. There's a silence that only exists in a home after its last heartbeat has left. Not the silence of peace, but of vacancy. The kind that makes floorboards groan differently, makes the air feel stiller, like the house is waiting uncertain of its future. That's the kind of silence I heard when I stepped back inside 122 Willow Lane the day after Ethan's betrayal. I didn't knock. I still had a key. The house smelled faintly of cedar and lemon the way it always had when Dad polished the floors on Sunday mornings, while humming off key to old Motown records. But now the scent was masked by something synthetic. A realtor's candle fake vanilla. I walked into the kitchen and paused. Everything looked almost the same. The slate gray counters Ethan insisted were outdated were still there. The little notches Dad carved into the doorway every birthday to mark our heights, still etched. Mine stopped at 16. Ethan's stopped at 14. That says a lot, I guess. Dad wasn't a man of many words, but his actions spoke volumes. He built this house himself with a loan and a lot of hope after Mom left. I was 4. Ethan was 9. I don't remember the fights. Just the quiet after she packed her bags. The way Dad suddenly had shadows under his eyes. How he learned to braid my hair watching YouTube tutorials. How he patched Ethan's baseball gloves when the seams gave out. How he showed up for everything, rain or shine, no matter what. I remember one night when I was 7, I had a nightmare and ran into his room sobbing. He didn't say much, just pulled me onto the bed, wrapped his arm around me and whispered, "It's just a bad dream, Lissy. You're always safe here." Safe. That word had weight in this house, but now it was slipping through my fingers. Shh. I sat down at the kitchen table, the one Dad built out of reclaimed oak, and stared at the old picture frame still sitting near the coffee machine. It was a photo of the 3 of us. Dad in a flannel shirt, his arm around Ethan and me on his lap holding a trout we'd caught on Lake Morgan. All of us laughing. The last year before things started to fracture. Ethan had always been ambitious, but something shifted when he left for college. He went from being my protector to someone I barely recognized. Dad said it was just a phase, but I saw how Ethan's visits grew shorter, how he stopped calling except when he needed something. When Dad got sick, Ethan flew home for 3 days, dropped off smoothies from a cleanse program, and lectured me on thinking bigger. Then he was gone again, Bali or Berlin or Boston, until the final month when the doctors used the word terminal. He came back wearing expensive shoes and designer sunglasses, and suddenly started taking an interest in handling things. At the time, I was too exhausted from caregiving to question it. Now I see it clearly. He was circling like a vulture. But Dad wasn't blind, and neither was I anymore. Later that afternoon, I visited the boathouse. It sat at the edge of the backyard where the yard sloped gently into Lake Morgan. Inside was Dad's canoe covered in a blue tarp, and the tackle box he never let anyone else organize. Next to it was his tool chest, the sacred one with everything labeled and locked. Except now it wasn't locked. Inside, resting on top of the hammer drawer, was an envelope. Another one, labeled simply, Melissa. My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside was a small notepad and a folded sheet of graph paper. On it, Dad had scribbled a rough floor plan of the house and marked an X in the attic corner. Under it, just in case he pushes too far. "You'll know what to do." I laughed, a small startled sound that cracked into a sob. My father always planning, always 3 steps ahead of disaster. He couldn't stop cancer, but maybe he could stop Ethan. I left the boathouse shaking but determined. If Ethan thought he could erase everything Dad built, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. That night, I dreamed of when Dad built the tree swing in the backyard. I was 10, and Ethan was holding the ladder while Dad secured the ropes. I remember how he turned to us and said, "Everything I build for you too. But it only lasts if you protect it." At the time, I just wanted to turn on the swing. Now I finally understood. In the morning, I called Carol Jennings again. Her assistant transferred me quickly. "Melissa," Carol said warmly, her voice the same as it had been at Dad's memorial, soft but razor-sharp. "I was expecting your call sooner. Something's happened," I said. "Ethan sold the house. Without telling me." A pause. "Did he now?" "I found something in Dad's tool chest. And he gave me a letter before he passed. Said you had a key." Carol was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "Come in tomorrow morning. Bring anything you've found. It's time." Time for what? Her voice turned firm. Time to honor your father's final instructions. I still remember the sound of my father's cough that winter, dry, sharp, and persistent. At first, he brushed it off like he always did. Just the cold air, he told me, standing on the porch with a mug of black coffee in one hand and a half-built birdhouse in the other. Your old man's lungs are made of Vermont pine. Nothing can shake 'em. But the cough didn't go away. Then came the weight loss, the fatigue, the tremor in his hands when he thought I wasn't looking. By the time we convinced him to see a doctor, the diagnosis came swift and unforgiving. Acute myeloid leukemia, stage 4, terminal. 6 to 9 months, the oncologist said. Maybe a year if he responded to treatment. But Dad, ever the realist, shook the doctor's hand, thanked him, and quietly declined chemo. I've spent my whole life building things, he said to me that night as we sat by the fire. I won't spend my last months tearing myself down. I didn't argue. I just held his hand and we watched the flames in silence. That was the beginning of the end. I moved back home immediately. I took family leave from school, packed up my apartment, and turned the upstairs guest room into my new bedroom. Every morning, I made Dad eggs and toast, and every evening we'd watch reruns of his favorite old sitcoms while I rubbed ointment on his aching knees. Ethan, meanwhile, was in Ibiza. Yes, Ibiza. He sent a text, something like, "Sorry to hear about Dad," sending positive energy and then silence for 6 weeks. When he finally showed up, it was with a tan new sunglasses and a sleek leather weekender bag that looked like it cost more than my car. He stayed for 3 days. To his credit, he brought fresh juice and expensive vitamin supplements. He talked about alternative therapies and CBD oils and wellness retreats. He even sat by Dad's bedside once, posted a picture of them holding hands on his Instagram with the caption, "Cherish every moment. Family first." He left the next morning. The next time I saw Ethan was a month later, just after the hospice nurse started doing overnight shifts. I walked into the living room one afternoon and found him flipping through a thick stack of papers spread out across the dining table. Financial documents, deed copies, account statements. He looked up, all smooth charm. "Hey, Liz, just trying to help you get ahead of the logistics. I mean, you've got your hands full." I narrowed my eyes. "Where did you get those?" "Dad gave me access," he said casually, tapping the top folder. "You know, he trusts me with this stuff. I've always had the business head." That night, I told Dad. His reaction was subtle. No anger, no panic, just a deep sigh. Then he reached into the drawer of the bedside table and pulled out a small notebook with a red ribbon tied around it. "I've made arrangements," he said. "But if Ethan starts acting premature, talk to Carol." I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time. I do now. There was a shift after that. Ethan started coming by more often. He was polite to Dad, overly so. He made a point to take selfies with him, document family moments he hadn't shown up for in years. But when I asked him to drive Dad to appointments or pick up medications, he always had an excuse. "I have a pitch meeting. I'm on a conference call. I don't do hospitals, Liz. They mess with my energy." So I did everything. Again, I bathed Dad. I tracked his meds. I changed his sheets at 3 a.m. when he was too weak to make it to the bathroom. I caught him once trying to write a note in the dark, his hand shaking too much to finish it. I sat with him, wiped his tears, told him it was okay to rest. And still, Ethan floated in and out, smiling for cameras, whispering to lawyers, and leaving just before it got too hard. The last real conversation I had with Dad was 2 weeks before he passed. We were on the back porch. The sun had just dipped below the tree line, and the lake glowed with that surreal golden hue you only see once in a while, like the world holding its breath. He looked at me, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know I love you both," he said. "I know," I whispered back, choking on tears. "But love doesn't mean blind trust." He paused, then reached into his jacket pocket and pressed something into my hand. It was a silver key. "To the shed," he said, "in the blue toolbox. Top drawer. Don't open it yet. Just when you feel like something's not right." I nodded. He smiled. "You'll know." 2 weeks later, he was gone. The funeral was small per his wishes. No flowers, no speeches, just a quiet service by the lake, and an old Johnny Cash song playing softly on a portable speaker. Ethan showed up in a black turtleneck and dark sunglasses. He cried into a linen handkerchief during the service, posed for a few photos with extended family, and left before the coffee urn was empty. I stayed behind and watched the sun dip below the lake again. The silence this time felt heavier, final. But I knew somewhere deep in my gut this wasn't over. Dad had left something behind. Not just memories, not just grief. A plan. The day after my meeting with Carol was set, I returned to the house on Willow Lane. Not to fight Ethan. Not yet. I had somewhere else to go. The tool shed. It stood behind the house like a loyal dog, weathered but sturdy, with a slanted tin roof that clattered in the wind. Dad used to joke that it was his thinking temple, a place where nails, memories, and mistakes were pounded into order with the same hammer. I hadn't set foot inside since the funeral. As I unlocked the creaky door with the silver key Dad gave me, a wave of cedar and engine oil hit me. I inhaled deeply. That scent was more my father than any cologne. It wrapped around me like a hug and a warning at once. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The pegboard lined with perfectly spaced tools. The mason jars filled with screws and bolts sorted by size. A yellowing paper pinned to the wall labeled Project. Treehouse 2002 still bearing my childlike doodles in the margins. And there it was. The blue toolbox. I sat down on the stool beside it and gently lifted the lid. Inside, nestled between a pair of worn leather gloves and an old chisel, was a sealed manila envelope. On the front, in Dad's neat handwriting, "For Melissa, only if he overreaches." My hands trembled as I peeled it open. Inside were several things: a flash drive, a folded document with a notary seal, and a short, handwritten note. "Liz, if you're reading this, then your instincts were right. Ethan's charm doesn't hide his ambition, not anymore. I wanted to believe he'd grow into the man I raised, but greed has a way of starving love. I had to act quietly, privately. The deed to the house is no longer in both your names. You'll find the documentation enclosed. The transfer happened 6 months ago through the Hart Family Trust. Carol has the full legal file. You may be wondering why I didn't just tell you. The answer is simple. If Ethan knew before I passed, he would have made my final days hell. I couldn't bear that. But I also couldn't risk him taking what he never cherished. He sees this house as property. You see it as home. That's why it belongs to you. I'm sorry for the secrets, but I did this to protect what I built. You, Dad." I sat there for a long time, my fingers tracing his familiar script. So it was true. Dad had seen it coming. Ethan's manipulation, his moves, the sales pitch masquerading as sibling support. And in his final months, while everyone thought he was fading, he was making his boldest move yet, securing the one thing that mattered most. Not the house, but the legacy inside it. I tucked the envelope into my bag along with the flash drive and the deed copy. Then I noticed something else tucked beneath a shelf of old fishing gear. A small wooden box. It was the one Dad had made from salvaged maple wood with the initials F.H. burned into the lid. I hadn't seen it in years. Inside were keepsakes. An old photo of him and Mom on their wedding day. Ethan's hospital bracelet from the day he was born. My first crayon drawing of Dad and me. A stick figure with giant ears and a hammer. And taped to the lid, a small USB drive labeled "For Her Eyes Only." I didn't open it yet. I knew I'd need a quiet space for that. When I stepped out of the shed, I saw Ethan on the back porch. He had the audacity to wave. "Liz," he called out, sipping something from a crystal tumbler. "Need a tour of the updated listing? I'm thinking of replacing the porch swing. It creaks like hell." I stared at him for a long moment. "I'm meeting with Carol tomorrow," I said. "She said there are updates you might not be aware of." His smile faltered for just a second. Then he laughed. "Carol. Oh, please. That relic's still practicing. Don't waste your time." He didn't know. He really didn't know. And that gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks. Leverage. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. I stayed in town in the tiny lakeside motel where the power flickered and the air smelled like pine cleaner and mothballs. I pulled out the USB. My hand shook as I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered. A folder appeared. Memories. Inside, dozens of videos. The first one opened automatically. Dad sat in his recliner, pale but smiling. The oxygen tank hummed softly in the background. His voice was low but clear. "Hey, Liz, if you're watching this, you've already found the documents. I hope you're not mad. I didn't tell you everything because I wanted you to focus on being my daughter, not my lawyer. Ethan, he always needed more. More money, more praise, more control. I hoped being here again would soften him. But I saw the way he looked at the house when he thought I was asleep. I had to do what I could with the time I had. This house, it's more than wood and nails. It's your childhood, your sanctuary. It's Sunday mornings and burnt pancakes. It's the swing you built with me when you were 11. It's the hole in the wall you patched yourself because you didn't want me to see you'd cried. Protect it. Protect yourself. Love, Dad." The video ended. I sat there in silence, tears streaking my cheeks. He knew. He'd known all along. Tomorrow, Ethan would find out. And for once, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. It was drizzling when I arrived at Carol Jennings's law office the next morning. The building was an old, converted train station on the edge of downtown Harts Point, red brick, iron beams, and stained glass windows that caught the gray light in a way that made the air inside feel quieter than outside. Like secrets lived here. I stepped through the heavy wooden doors with the manila envelope in my bag, and my father's voice still echoing in my ears from the video I'd watched the night before. "Protect it. Protect yourself." Carol's assistant, a kind woman named Evelyn, greeted me with a warm smile. "Ms. Hart, please head right in. She's expecting you." I walked into Carol's office and found her already standing, hand extended, eyes sharp. "Melissa," she said, "you brought it." I handed her the envelope and flash drive. She examined them briefly, then motioned for me to sit. Her desk was stacked neatly, folders labeled with heart in bold black print. One of them had a red tab. "I want to be very clear about what we're doing." She began folding her hands. "Your father left 2 legal documents behind. One public, the will. The other, the trust and deed transfer, is private and supersedes the will." My pulse quickened. "So the will doesn't matter for the house," she finished. "But it does matter for the rest. And today, Ethan is expecting a show. We're going to give it to him." I blinked. "You're going to let him think. Let him celebrate," she said. "For now." I sat back in the chair, processing her words. Carol continued. "He'll receive notice next week regarding the invalidity of the sale. That gives us time to document every step of his actions, every public misrepresentation of ownership. The more rope he gives himself, the harder he'll fall." I nodded slowly. It was brilliant. And it was cruel. But it was exactly what my father would have done. 10 minutes later, Ethan arrived. He strutted into the office like a man who'd just closed a 6-figure deal. Dark gray suit hair, slicked back shoes that probably cost the same as my rent. He gave me a condescending smile and a wink, then turned to Carol. "Ms. Jennings," he said like he was addressing a secretary. "I hope you'll make this quick. I've got a flight to catch this afternoon." Carol didn't flinch. "Let's begin." She opened a leather folder and read aloud. "I, Frank Hart, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." I zoned out for a moment, watching Ethan. He leaned back in his chair like he owned the world. Then Carol reached the section on property. "The family home at 122 Willow Lane is to be passed jointly to my children, Melissa Hart and Ethan Hart." Ethan's lips curled into a slow, smug smile. He glanced sideways at me, the same look he used to give when he beat me at board games as a kid. "In equal ownership with full rights to manage, alter, or sell the property as they see fit." He practically beamed. "Well, that settles that," he said. "Guess it's time to pop the champagne, sis." I said nothing. Carol calmly closed the folder and stacked it beside her. "But that's not all, is it?" I asked, keeping my tone level. "Because you know, Dad." Ethan frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I mean," I said, leaning forward, "you honestly think Dad would have just left the house wide open like that? For you to sell without even talking to me?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're the one who disappeared, Melissa. I had to take initiative." Carol stepped in. As you both know, the will was drafted 3 years ago. Much has changed since then. Ethan scoffed. If he wanted to change something, he would have updated it. He did, I said softly. Ethan turned to me. What? Nothing you need to worry about. Yet. His eyes narrowed. This is about that damn shed, isn't it? Carol interrupted. Gentlemen from the title company and the county clerk's office will be contacting both of you next week to clarify the current legal status of the property. Until then, I advise neither of you to make further moves without consulting an attorney. Ethan stood up. This is ridiculous. The house is sold? Done deal. Carol gave him a small, chilly smile. If you say so. Outside, I followed Ethan into the parking lot. Why are you so desperate to get rid of the house? I asked. He whirled around. Because it's a money pit, Melissa. Dad kept it together with duct tape and sentiment. You think he left us anything else? That house is the only thing with value. My heart twisted. To you. He shrugged. I've spent years building my own life. I'm not going to babysit a bunch of old furniture and dusty memories. I stepped closer. You sold it behind my back, Ethan. That wasn't a business move. That was betrayal. He pointed at me. Don't get all righteous now. You weren't even around when Mom left. I raised you. I took care of Dad when he got diagnosed. I froze. You were in Greece. His eyes flashed. I was dealing with things in my own way. No, I said. You were running. Just like you always do. He turned without a word and got into his car, slamming the door behind him. As he drove away, I whispered under my breath. You have no idea what's coming. That evening, I met Carol again. She handed me a new folder stamped with the trust's seal. From this point forward, she said, Ethan can say what he likes. The house legally belongs to you. The county's records will reflect the deed transfer within 48 hours. The title company will block the sale at closing. And when that happens, we'll be ready. I nodded. Thank you. Carol hesitated. Melissa, your father wanted peace. That's why he didn't fight Ethan in life. But now he's put the truth in your hands. I looked down at the folder. Then it's time I do something with it. I couldn't sleep that night, even after Carol confirmed the trust was legally sound. Even after I watched my father's second video message, the one where he explained how the trust was created step by step so that it could never be contested. My thoughts kept spinning. What if Ethan found a way to challenge it? What if the buyers didn't back out and this turned into a legal circus? What if I wasn't strong enough to go through all of this alone? But the more I sat with those questions, the clearer one truth became. Dad had trusted me to handle this. He didn't give Ethan the trust. He gave it to me. That had to mean something. The next morning, I returned to Carol's office. She was already waiting with a fresh folder on her desk, this time marked Hart Family Trust, Property, Transfer Agreement. She handed it to me without a word. Inside was a full copy of the documents Dad had filed just 6 months before his death. Grantor, Franklin J. Hart. Trustee, Melissa A. Hart. Beneficiary, Melissa A. Hart. Asset, 122 Willow Lane, Harts Point, Vermont. Clause, immediate transfer upon execution of deed. Delayed activation of notification until legal dispute or sale attempt is initiated by any third party not named in the trust. My eyes stopped on the clause. I read it twice. Then again. Delayed activation of notification, I whispered. Carol nodded. Your father was meticulous. He anticipated resistance, so he built a trigger. I looked up, meaning, she leaned back. Meaning the county clerk's office was instructed not to notify Ethan of the deed transfer until an external party like a buyer or real estate agent filed sale documentation. That happened 3 days ago. I stared at her. So when Ethan started showing the house, the clause was triggered. Public records are now in process of being updated. Ethan just doesn't know yet. I couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips. That's genius. Carol allowed herself a tiny nod. Your father didn't leave loose ends. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the courthouse records office just to see it for myself. And there it was. Line 12 on the monitor. Owner of record, Melissa A. Hart. Transfer date, filed 6 months prior, verified by County Recorder's Office. I took a picture with my phone. Proof, real, unshakable. My hands trembled slightly as I put my phone away, because I knew Ethan's fantasy was about to come crashing down. That night, I drove back to the house. I didn't go in. I just sat across the street in my car watching. Lights were on in the living room. Ethan moved from room to room laughing with someone. The realtor maybe, or a stager, or another buyer. I couldn't tell, but I saw it, the illusion. He believed he had already won. He had the furniture rearranged. Dad's recliner moved into the garage walls, cleared of family photos. Even the old porch swing had been taken down, replaced with a sleek bench made of metal and glass. Cold, soulless, and absolutely not his. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was ready. The next morning, I met Carol at the title company. We were there to deliver the official cease and desist letter, a legal declaration that the sale was fraudulent and that any attempt to close on the property would result in immediate litigation. The title rep, a woman named Marcy with a lawyer's precision and a tired smile, scanned the paperwork slowly. When she looked up, her expression had changed. "You're saying the current listing is invalid?" Carol nodded. "The deed transfer predates the will and is legally binding. The property was never part of Ethan Hart's inheritance. The listing is fraudulent. And the buyers? We will contact them directly," Carol said. "They'll be disappointed. But their issue is with Ethan and the agent, not Melissa." Marcy leaned back. "This could get ugly." "I'm counting on it," Carol replied. I left the office feeling more in control than I had in weeks. But it didn't last long. That afternoon, I received an email from Ethan. Subject: "What the hell did you do?" Melissa: "I just got a call from the title company. They're saying the sale is frozen, that you somehow own the house. This isn't over. You don't get to just rewrite Dad's will. You don't get to take everything. I will fight this." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Carol. She answered within 5 minutes. "Let him push. The more noise he makes, the clearer our case becomes. You hold the title. The rest is just theatrics." That evening, I sat by the lake behind the house. The water was still. The air smelled like pine and moss and summer beginning to fade. I pulled out Dad's notebook. Inside the front cover, he'd scribbled one line: "When it feels like you're walking into a storm, remember who built the roof over your head." I closed the book and looked up at the stars peeking through the clouds. I wasn't in this house because of luck. I was here because of love, because of foresight, because Dad knew, even at the end, how to protect the people he loved from the ones who only came around when it was convenient. And now it was my turn. By Monday morning, the for sale sign had been updated with a bright red sold sticker, the kind of sticker that screams finality. Except it wasn't. Not even close. I drove past the house that morning with the windows down, hoping for peace, and finding only tension. The swing was still gone. The flower beds had been uprooted. The mailbox had been replaced with a sleek black modern one that looked like it belonged on the porch of a Silicon Valley condo. It didn't match anything here, especially not what this house used to be. I parked around the corner and walked the long way to avoid Ethan spotting me from the front window. But as I neared the end of the gravel path beside the garage, I heard voices. "Inspection's complete. Should be no delays," someone said. Then Ethan's voice, smug and confident. "Let's make sure we move fast. I don't want any surprises." Too late. I waited until they were gone, Ethan and the agent both driving away in matching smugness, then circled back and walked into the backyard. It was strange standing there alone. The porch still had the shape of the old swing etched in its shadows. The lawn had fresh grass seed scattered over bare patches. The oak tree where Dad used to hang Christmas lights had a bright blue ribbon tied around it marked for removal. And still, the house stood tall. It wasn't giving up. Neither was I. That afternoon, Carol and I met with Marcy from the title company again, this time with a formal injunction request in hand. Carol filed the paperwork and attached the trust documents, the deed, and a signed affidavit from the county clerk. Marcy's face said everything. "This changes everything," she murmured, reading through the trust clause for the third time. Carol nodded. "We want formal notice sent to the buyer's agent today, before they get too comfortable. And if they try to close anyway, then we're ready to sue," I said. Marcy blinked, then smiled. "Good. Because I think they're scheduling the final walkthrough tomorrow? That evening, Ethan texted me again. You're being incredibly immature. I offered to split the profits. You had your chance to be part of this. Don't blame me when it's too late. I didn't respond. Instead, I showed up the next morning for the walkthrough uninvited. The buyers were there already. A couple in their 40s. Well-dressed, clearly urbanites trying to escape city life for something authentic. They stood near the fireplace talking with the agent who I now knew was named David. Ethan spotted me as I walked in through the back. He marched over, voice low and furious. What the hell are you doing here? I live here, I said simply. Not for long, he sneered. David walked over awkwardly, smiling. Hi, can I help you? I turned to him, pulled the manila folder from my bag, and handed it to him. I suggest you read this before continuing any further. The sale you're facilitating is invalid. Ethan laughed. This is insane. I didn't flinch. The property was transferred to me through a family trust, 6 months before our father died. The sale was never authorized by the rightful owner. David blinked. Wait, you own the house? Carol had coached me on what to say. I'm the sole title holder. Your client. I nodded toward Ethan. Either doesn't know that or has chosen to ignore it. Ethan turned beet red. Don't listen to her. This is just a last-minute stunt. She's always been dramatic. David flipped through the folder, brow furrowing deeper with every page. Melissa, the buyer, the wife said. Is this true? I nodded. I'm sorry this is how you found out. You didn't do anything wrong, but this sale isn't real. David stepped back, now visibly concerned. We're going to need to pause everything. Ethan exploded. You can't do this. You can't just hijack a legal transaction. Carol had warned me this would happen, so I pulled out my final card. The county records show the trust. The title company has verified it. And your own sale documents are based on false ownership claims. I looked at the couple. You seem like good people. I hope you find your dream home. But this house, this one isn't for sale. Ethan stormed out without another word. The couple followed moments later, David apologizing profusely as they climbed into their Audi and drove away. I stood on the porch for a long time watching the sun cut through the clouds over the lake. This place wasn't just protected. It had been defended. Quietly, strategically, thoroughly, just like Dad always did. Later that evening, I got a call from Carol. He tried to file a challenge. She said, her voice cool. Didn't go well? What did the court say? She paused. Then, the judge denied the motion. Too late. Too baseless. Too public. I closed my eyes, letting the news wash over me. And for the first time in weeks, I exhaled. That night, I returned to the shed. I opened Dad's old box again, pulled out the USB labeled "For Her Eyes Only," and watched a video I hadn't touched yet. It was short, less than 2 minutes. He looked weaker this time, pale under the harsh lighting, but his eyes were sharp. Hey, Liz, I'm guessing Ethan's made a mess of things. I hope Carol's been helpful. Pause. This wasn't easy, you know. Writing you into the trust, rewriting the deed, keeping it quiet. I didn't do it to punish him. I did it because I knew what mattered to each of you. For him, it's control. For you, it's care. And this house, it's not walls and shingles. It's history. It's you. Don't let him take it. You were always stronger than you thought. Soft smile. I love you, kid. The screen went dark. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just nodded and whispered back to him. I'm not letting go. On Wednesday morning, 3 days after the failed walkthrough, I received a call I half expected and still wasn't ready for. Hi, this is Amanda from Westlake Realty, the voice said. I'm calling to confirm closing day on the Willow Lane property. We have you listed as co-owner on our contract and you'll need to stop right there, I said calmly. There won't be a closing. A pause. I'm sorry. I own the house outright, I replied. The sale is unauthorized and your buyer has been informed. Ethan Hart no longer has legal claim to the property. Another pause. Then a nervous laugh. That can't be right. I was told everything was in order. That you had agreed. I never did. And I suggest you speak to your brokerage's legal team before proceeding further. I hung up and sent a quick message to Carol. Within 5 minutes, she had emailed a cease and desist letter to Amanda and her agency. It was beginning. The unraveling. But Ethan, he wasn't done playing the game. That same afternoon, I drove by the house to find the Soldy sticker still plastered across the sign, bold, smug, unbothered. And next to it in the yard, a white SUV idled while movers carried labeled boxes down the steps. He was staging the house again. I parked a block away, heart pounding, and walked straight into the chaos. Ethan stood in the living room, directing the movers like a director on a movie set. Careful with that frame, it's vintage. Put the art books back on the coffee table. No spine outward. Make it look curated. Are you insane? I said, stepping through the door. He turned startled, then quickly adjusted his face into a practiced smirk. Oh, look, it's the martyr, he said. Didn't think I'd give up that easily, did you? You're literally trespassing. He crossed his arms. Funny. That's what I was going to say. You don't own this house, I snapped. The sale is frozen. The title company knows. The buyers know. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here? He waved a hand like I was being dramatic. Staging for contingency buyers. If the Bradfords back out, we've got 2 others lined up. Carol can scream all she wants, but once the ink's dry, this all goes away. My voice lowered. It's not going away, Ethan. You can't sell what doesn't belong to you. That's what litigation is for, he replied with a wink. Let the court decide. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. You're risking fraud charges. He snorted. Please. I'm just executing Dad's will. You're the one who snuck behind everyone's back with that trust maneuver. I stepped closer. Dad didn't trust you, Ethan. That's the truth you're choking on. He froze. Just for a second. Then he smiled tightly. You think this house is some symbol of love? Some shrine? It's just real estate, Melissa. You're letting grief turn you into a martyr. But this, he gestured around the room. This is business. No, I said. This is betrayal. Later that evening, Carol called. The Bradfords officially backed out, she said. Their agent just sent over the termination notice. What happens now? They'll issue a formal withdrawal from escrow. The check Ethan received has to be returned. And we've requested the listing be removed from all MLS platforms. Can they do that? They will, she said, because they don't want a lawsuit on their hands. And Ethan, Carol sighed. He's going to scramble. Probably try to spin this as an administrative mistake. Maybe even relist under a shell company. But it's too late. The county clerk's office has issued the final deed confirmation under your name. You're the only legal owner now on paper and in court. I nodded slowly. So this is it? Not quite, she said. You still need to make one decision. What's that? Whether you want to press charges. That night, I wandered through the house alone. The movers had left. The staged items were half-packed. Ethan had disappeared, probably regrouping somewhere in his overpriced condo downtown. I opened the door to my old bedroom. It was empty except for one thing. A worn cardboard box labeled, Melissa, Childhood Keepsakes. It was my handwriting. And it wasn't packed by Ethan. Inside were things only Dad would have known to keep. My 3rd grade poetry contest ribbon, the pressed maple leaf I gave him after our first fall hike. The wooden duck I carved with him for the school fair. He'd packed this before he died. He knew I'd be back. He knew Ethan would try to erase me, but he made sure I'd never be erased from this house. I sat on the floor holding a tiny ballerina figurine I'd long forgotten. It was chipped on one arm, a gift from Dad the year I quit ballet and cried for a week. And I thought about everything Ethan said, and everything Dad didn't. My brother saw the house as a win. My father saw it as a final message. Not you deserve this, but you'll protect this. Just before bed, I received one final message from Ethan. You may have won round 1, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot. I stared at the screen for a while, then typed only one reply. It was never a competition. That's why you lost? 2 days after the buyers officially withdrew, Ethan's world finally began to crumble, not in a dramatic explosion, but in the slow, suffocating way that reality sinks in when it's too late to fix. It started with an envelope, hand-delivered by a clerk from the Vermont Superior Court. Inside was a formal notice of investigation. Title fraud, misrepresentation of ownership and unauthorized contractual agreements. all stemming from his attempt to sell a property he didn't legally own. Carol had filed the necessary documentation on my behalf, not because I asked her to, but because the evidence left no room for leniency. Power of attorney abuse, forgery concerns, false statements on escrow documents, and worst of all, perjury. He had signed an affidavit swearing he was the sole owner of 122 Willow Lane. That alone could cost him his freedom and everything he thought he controlled. When Ethan called, I didn't answer. Not the first time. Not the fifth. Not even the 11th. By the 12th attempt, he left a voicemail. His voice was panicked now, a far cry from the polished, smug tone he usually wore like cologne. Melissa, we need to talk. I didn't know. Okay. I thought, Dad, I didn't. Long pause. You're really doing this to me. To your own brother. Yes. Yes, I was. But not because I wanted revenge. Because he needed to understand the line he crossed and what it meant to burn the last bridge between us. That afternoon, Carol and I met again at her office. She handed me a new file. Inside were screenshots of Ethan's listing copies of the sale agreement, his notarized signature emails between him and the buyer's agent, all bundled and cataloged for court. She looked at me seriously. The DA's office is reviewing this. You don't need to push for prosecution, but they might anyway. I swallowed hard. Could he go to jail? If convicted, yes. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Do I have to testify? Possibly. But there's a chance he'll settle quietly, pay a fine, walk away with his reputation shattered instead of his record. I nodded, then asked the question that had haunted me all week. Do I want to press charges? Carol sat back and folded her hands. Melissa, your father spent months preparing to protect you from this. He knew your brother might do something reckless. He built every safeguard possible, except one. I frowned. What? Forgiveness. The word landed like a hammer to the chest. He left the legal tools, Carol continued. But the emotional ones? That's yours to decide. That night, I found myself driving. Nowhere in particular. Just long winding roads through pine forests and empty fields. I passed the old diner where Dad and I used to get milkshakes after hardware store runs. The gas station where he taught me to check oil levels. The overlook on Crescent Ridge where he took me on my 18th birthday and told me I'd survive anything because I'd already survived everything. I ended up at the lake, Willow Point, where Dad used to fish in the mornings, his boots buried in the muddy shoreline, steam rising from his coffee like a quiet promise. I got out of the car, sat on a rock near the water, and called Ethan. He picked up on the first ring. Liz. He breathed as if we were still siblings in any real sense of the word. You lied, I said. I thought I had to. You forged a legal sale. You listed a house you didn't own. You tried to erase me. He didn't answer. I could press charges, I said. I know. I could let the state press them instead. Silence. Then, what do you want from me? That was the problem, wasn't it? I didn't want anything. Not money. Not apologies. Not even justice in the courtroom sense. I wanted him to care. I wanted him to look at the house and see more than profit margins. I wanted the big brother who used to push my swing and call me Squirt. But that boy was long gone. So I said, I want you to walk away. A beat. That's it. Yes. Walk away. No counters. No more buyers. No lawyers. You disappear. You say nothing to the press, to the family, to anyone. You fade out. And if I don't, then you'll learn exactly how much of Dad's mind I inherited. I hung up before he could reply. The next morning, Ethan did something I never expected. He surrendered. He emailed Carol copying the title office, the buyer's agent, and the escrow company. I hereby release all claims to 122 Willow Lane and acknowledge that the previous sale attempt was made in error. I will not pursue further action regarding this property. I accept full responsibility for the confusion surrounding ownership and agree to resolve this matter without litigation. It was the cleanest, most mature document he'd ever written, probably because a lawyer wrote it for him. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that legally and publicly he'd stepped back. I read it once, then again. Then I deleted the voicemail he left me and blocked his number. He'd finally heard the wake-up call. and I'd finally answered mine. Saturday morning arrived with a quiet chill in the air, the kind that wrapped around your shoulders like a warning, or maybe a promise. The legal firestorm had burned through most of the week. Ethan had backed down in writing, the buyers had withdrawn their offer, and the listing had been removed. But even with all that, there was one final storm to weather. The meeting. Carol insisted on it. "It's better to close this chapter face to face," she said. "Put everyone in one room. Clear the air, and make the truth unmissable." And so we scheduled it, one last roundtable at the title company with all parties present. Me, Carol, Ethan, his attorney, the Bradfords, the now former buyers, their agent David, a representative from the title company, and for good measure, a mediator. At 10:00 a.m. sharp, I walked into the room. Ethan was already seated, dressed in all black, like he was attending a funeral. Maybe in a way he was. His face was unreadable, but his eyes flicked to mine for half a second and then away, like he couldn't hold my gaze. Carol sat beside me and slid the folder marked "Final Documentation" across the table. The Bradfords looked tense. Emily had her arms crossed and Thomas was gripping a leather folder like it might explode. David, their agent, looked sheepish. He'd been caught in the middle of a lie he didn't know he was telling. A woman named Helen Garcia from the title company took the lead. "Thank you all for coming," she began, cool and professional. "We're here today to formally resolve the status of 122 Willow Lane due to conflicting ownership claims and a failed transaction." She nodded to Carol. "Would you like to begin?" Carol opened the folder and spoke in her usual clear, authoritative tone. "My client, Melissa Hart, is the legal owner of the property in question. This is confirmed by a trust transfer executed by the late Franklin Hart 6 months before his death. The deed was filed and recorded with the county clerk's office, and public records now reflect her sole ownership." She paused. "Any attempt to sell the property without her consent is not only invalid, but constitutes title fraud. Mr. Ethan Hart," she gestured gently across the table, "acted without knowledge of this transfer, which is why we are here today, to clarify and resolve." Ethan's lawyer, a man named Greg Roth, cleared his throat. "Mr. Hart acknowledges the error. He believed he had authority under the will and power of attorney. He regrets the oversight and is prepared to formally withdraw any further claims." That should have been the end. But the Bradfords weren't satisfied. Thomas leaned forward. "We sold our apartment in Boston for this house." Emily's voice was sharper. "We hired a moving company. We paid for inspections. We canceled schools for our kids and transferred jobs, all based on a sale that never should have happened." David shifted awkwardly beside them. I apologize," he said. "We were misled." Ethan finally spoke. His voice was low, quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't know." Emily turned to him. "You signed legal paperwork." I thought he glanced at me, then back down. "I thought it was mine to sell." Carol interrupted. "We understand the emotional and financial inconvenience this caused, which is why my client has offered to provide a letter of support for any litigation you choose to pursue against Mr. Hart or the agency responsible for the sale." The Bradfords exchanged a glance. "This isn't on her," Thomas said finally. "It's on you, Ethan." Ethan didn't argue. Didn't even flinch. Just nodded. It was the first time I'd seen him accept blame without trying to twist it. And I almost didn't know what to do with that. After the meeting, the group trickled out slowly. The Bradfords left first, politely cold. David followed, apologizing again, this time with a business card and a muttered, "Let me know if you ever want to sell for real." I didn't take the card. Ethan stood last. He lingered by the doorway, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor. I waited. Finally, he looked up. "You could have destroyed me," he said. I shrugged. "You nearly destroyed us." A pause. "I'm sorry," he said, quietly, sincerely. I didn't say anything, because sorry wasn't enough. Not anymore. Carol and I walked to the parking lot in silence. The wind had picked up rustling leaves along the curb. My car sat under a maple tree, bright red leaves collecting on the hood. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I replied. "Do you want this to be the last meeting?" I nodded. "Yes. No more lawyers. No more paperwork. No more him." Then it's over, she said. And it was. Back at the house, I stood in the front yard and looked at the empty driveway. The sold sign had been removed. The grass still bore its outline like a bruise, but it would heal. Inside, the rooms were quiet again, finally. I walked through the house, slowly touching walls, windows, corners of memory. I stopped by the fireplace and sat on the old ottoman Dad used to rest his feet on. It was dusty, still smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Then I pulled out the last envelope from Dad's notebook, labeled in his careful hand. In case Ethan ever makes you question why I chose you. Inside was a photo. It was a candid me and Dad on the roof one fall installing Christmas lights. I was 16, laughing. He was holding the ladder, watching, proud. On the back he'd written, "Because you never needed the house to feel at home. That's why you deserve to protect it." For 72 hours there was silence. No emails, no calls, no letters, no news. And then, just when I started to believe Ethan had finally accepted defeat, a new envelope appeared in my mailbox. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't official, but it was definitely him. Scrawled across the back flap in permanent marker was one word: truth. Inside was a typed unsigned letter. The kind someone writes at 2 a, after too many drinks or too much time alone with their guilt. Melissa, you think you've won, but you don't know the full story. Dad told you what you needed to hear, what you wanted to hear, but he lied to both of us in different ways. You weren't his only secret. Did you ever wonder why the will was never updated? Why he left the house to both of us, even after supposedly transferring it to you? Because he wasn't sure. He never trusted either of us fully. He just played us off each other. And now you get to play the martyr and I get to be the villain. But if you want peace, if you want closure, then meet me. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., the dock. I read it twice, then folded it and stared out the window for a long time. Why would he reach out now? And why there, the dock? Dad's dock. The next evening, just before 6 p.m., I pulled into the gravel lot near Willow Point. The sky was slate gray with streaks of pale orange bleeding through the clouds. The air smelled like wet pine and early October. A storm was coming, but it hadn't broken yet. I walked the path slowly, and there he was, Ethan sitting at the edge of the dock, feet dangling over the water's shoulders, hunched like a man who'd finally run out of places to go. He didn't turn when he heard me approach. He just said, "You came." I didn't respond. I just stood behind him, arms crossed, waiting. "I didn't write that letter to manipulate you," he said. "At least not only." I raised an eyebrow. He sighed. "You're right, okay. I was angry. Still am. But I didn't come here to fight you." "Then why?" I asked. He looked out at the lake. "Because there's one more thing Dad left behind." My pulse skipped. "What do you mean?" Ethan finally turned to face me. His eyes were rimmed red, but not from tears. He looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "You think he only talked to you?" he said. "He gave me something too. Not a deed, not a trust, but a key." I frowned. "A key to what?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small brass key attached to a faded leather tag. It read, "FH Storage, 311B. I didn't know what it was until yesterday," he said. "It's a rental unit. Dad paid for it in cash every year. No digital trail." "And you went there?" I asked. He nodded. "There's a box, a small one. Inside were photographs, letters, journals." I narrowed my eyes. "What kind of letters?" He hesitated. "Letters to Mom." My chest tightened. "She wrote to him after she left," Ethan said. "They never spoke again, but she mailed him things. Birthday cards for us, notes, regrets. He kept them all." I sank onto the dock beside him. We sat in silence for a minute, both of us staring at the lake, at the spot where Dad used to stand in the early morning fog, casting his line like he was praying. "He read those letters every year," Ethan said softly. "I found one he wrote but never sent. It said, he didn't know how to forgive her, but he hoped we might." I swallowed hard. "She never reached out to me." "She tried," Ethan said. He stopped her. Said we were better off not looking back. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the reeds along the shore. "I'm not telling you this to make excuses," Ethan added. "I just wanted you to know that maybe we weren't the only ones who didn't get the full truth." I nodded slowly, then asked, "What do you want from me, Ethan?" He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. "Nothing," he said. "For once. Nothing. I just wanted to tell you the truth." Later that night, I opened the file folder Carol had given me with the final court documents. Everything was finished, signed, recorded, finalized. The house was mine, undisputed. But the story wasn't about ownership anymore. Not really. It was about legacy, what we carry, what we bury, what we choose to rebuild. I went to the attic that night, the one Dad converted into a studio after Mom left. I hadn't been up there in years. Dust swirled in the shaft of moonlight slicing through the window. A few of Dad's old oil paintings leaned against the walls. Most were unfinished, but one caught my eye. It was of the lake, and on the edge of the dock, two small figures, one taller, one shorter, both looking at the horizon. I realized it was us, me and Ethan, frozen in a memory neither of us could destroy. It wasn't until the following week that I truly understood the full ripple of what had happened, not just in courtrooms or contracts, but in real lives. Specifically in the life of a boy named Caleb. He was Ethan's son, my nephew, 7 years old with quiet eyes and an impossibly sharp memory. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. Not since the last awkward family brunch where Ethan brought him to the house and told him not to touch anything. Caleb spent most of that visit in the backyard kicking leaves alone while his father tried to pitch business ideas over French toast. Back then I thought of him as just a kid on the sidelines of something bigger. But now I realized he'd been watching everything. It started with a knock on the door, a soft, hesitant tap just after sunset. I opened it to find Caleb standing there alone, clutching a folded sheet of notebook paper and a backpack almost too big for his frame. His eyes were wide, uncertain. "Hi, Aunt Melissa." "Caleb." I blinked. "Is your dad here?" He shook his head. "He dropped me off at the end of the road. Said you'd know what to do." I stepped outside, heart thudding. "Wait, he just left you here." He nodded. "He said he was sorry." I knelt down slowly. "Did something happen?" He bit his lip. He said, "He's going away for a while. That I couldn't go with him." I brought him inside, heart-pounding adrenaline and panic rising like a tide. I gave him cocoa, wrapped him in one of Dad's old flannel blankets, and sat across from him at the kitchen table. The folded paper was still in his hand. "Can I see that?" I asked gently. He passed it over. It was a letter hastily written in Ethan's familiar scrawl. "Melissa, you were right. I crossed a line I can't uncross. They're opening a formal investigation. I've spoken with my lawyer. I'm turning myself in. I couldn't bring Caleb. I don't have the right to ask anyone for anything, but he trusts you. You're the only one who won't lie to him. Please take care of him, at least for now. I'll come back for him. When I can. I'm sorry." "Ethan!" I dropped the letter and stared at the table. 1,000 emotions stormed through me: anger, disbelief, heartbreak, confusion. But when I looked at Caleb, he just sat quietly, sipping his cocoa like all of this was just another strange grown-up problem he had to wait out. That night, after he fell asleep in the guest room, the same room Ethan once slept in as a boy, I sat on the porch and cried. For Dad, for Ethan, for Caleb, and maybe a little for myself. Because I'd won a house, but lost a brother, and now inherited something even heavier: responsibility. The next morning, I found Caleb in the kitchen standing on a stool trying to reach the pancake mix. "Dad said you make the best pancakes," he said, matter of fact. I smiled through the ache. He wasn't wrong. We made them together, flour everywhere. The stove a mess, the air filled with sizzling and maple syrup. Halfway through eating, he suddenly asked, "Why is Daddy in trouble?" I froze, then said the only truth I could. "Because sometimes people do the wrong thing, thinking it's the only way to fix something." He poked his fork into his pancake quiet. "He didn't want to hurt you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I know." And for a moment there was nothing but silence between us, broken only when he looked up and whispered, "I miss him." And that's when the tears came. Not mine. His. Tiny, hot, unstoppable. The kind of tears that don't belong to a child but fall from a soul too young to carry so much weight. He crawled into my lap and sobbed into my shirt. And I just held him. No answers, no promises, just arms. And heart? Later, I called Carol, told her everything. She paused for a long moment before saying, "He's in custody." "Ethan, they're offering him a plea deal. Fines, probation, maybe house arrest if he cooperates." I sighed. "He left Caleb here. I know, and I can't send him away." Carol's voice softened. "Then don't. You think I can do this? I think she said your father would have known you could." That evening, I pulled out one of Dad's old notebooks, the one he used to jot down building plans for the treehouse. In the margins were scribbles, measurements, ideas, doodles of a little girl and boy sitting on the porch swing. "Me and Ethan." I smiled through tears, then flipped to the back page. There in his neat handwriting, "A house isn't a home until it shelters a future." I looked at Caleb sleeping on the couch with his arms curled around one of Dad's old flannels. And I knew this wasn't just about protecting a house anymore. This was about protecting what it was always meant to hold. Family. It was a rainy Thursday when I found the box Ethan had left behind. Not intentionally, I'm sure. He probably forgot about it in the chaos of legal threats and custody decisions, and that slow-motion collapse of everything he once controlled. But there it was, pushed to the back of the master bedroom closet beneath a layer of dust and a plaid shirt I hadn't seen since Dad's last Thanksgiving. The box was plain, just cardboard sealed with black electrical tape, labeled in Dad's handwriting. "E. For when you're ready." I froze. There was something sacred about it, something final, something I wasn't sure I had the right to open, but also knew I had to. That night, after Caleb fell asleep on the couch again, curled up with the old flannel and a bedtime story half read beside him, I brought the box to the kitchen table and sat across from it for nearly 20 minutes. Then with shaking fingers, I cut the tape. Inside were 4 things: a black leather notebook worn at the corners, a flash drive in a small velvet pouch, a pair of Dad's reading glasses, and a letter addressed not to Ethan, but to my son. I read the letter first. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means you're still here. And that matters more than you probably believe right now. I know I hurt you. I know you felt second to your sister. I know you saw every handshake I gave her as proof of favoritism, every hard question I asked you as judgment. I wish I'd said this out loud, but I didn't trust my own words to reach you the right way. So I left these instead. The notebook is yours. Your childhood drawings, notes from me, ideas we never built together. Remember how you wanted to design your own treehouse with solar panels? It's in there, alongside reminders that you were always more creative than you gave yourself credit for." The flash drive holds something else: videos, birthdays, firsts, moments where I bragged about you to strangers because I didn't know how to say it to your face. It's proof that I saw you, that I loved you. And the glasses, well, I suppose that's my way of saying, look closer. You always looked at life like it owed you something. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But Son, grace isn't what you take when things go right. It's what you give when they don't. Forgiveness starts with you. Love. Dad. By the end, I was crying again. Not for me, but for him, for Ethan, for the little boy who'd once clung to my hand when Dad brought us camping, for the teenager who stopped hugging people the year Mom left, for the man who broke things before anyone else could. I opened the notebook next. Page after page of Ethan's scrawled inventions. A skateboard that could hover over puddles. A vending machine that only gave out jokes and gum. A diagram of Ethan's future mansion complete with a waterfall slide and a robot butler. And then, notes from Dad. "Let's build this one together over spring break. Proud of how your brain works even when I don't understand it. Try again. You're closer than you think." I sat there with it in my lap, the storm pounding gently against the windows, and wondered how much hurt could have been avoided if Ethan had opened this sooner. But grief doesn't run on clocks, and some boxes can only be opened after the damage is done. I didn't call Ethan. I just sent him a photo. The notebook opened to the drawing of the treehouse with the solar panels. A minute later, he replied. I forgot that drawing existed. He saved it. I replied with one word. All of it. He didn't respond. But the read receipt blinked green, and I knew something small had cracked open. Maybe not healing, but possibility. That weekend, Caleb and I went up to the attic again. He found a box of Legos and spread them across the floor like blueprints. "Do you think Grandpa would have helped me build a robot?" he asked. I smiled. I think he would have insisted. We spent the afternoon surrounded by bricks and stories, inventing a world where forgiveness was just another kind of foundation. And for the first time in weeks, the house felt light again. Not because the pain had passed, but because something stronger had arrived. Understanding. The first time the kitchen light flickered after Dad passed, I thought it was just faulty wiring. The second time, I thought maybe it was a loose bulb. The third time, the morning after I read Ethan's letter and held that old leather notebook in my hands, I stopped trying to explain it. Some things don't need reasons. They need presence. I was standing at the stove flipping pancakes for Caleb again, when the light blinked once briefly and then held steady. I looked up at the old fixture, brass and glass, slightly crooked from age, and smiled. "Morning, Dad," I whispered. Caleb didn't hear me. He was too busy arranging blueberries into a smiling face on his plate, humming softly under his breath. But I saw something in that moment I hadn't seen in weeks. Not just routine returning, but warmth, life, a future. That afternoon, we planted tulips in the garden. Caleb wore one of Dad's old flannels far too big for him, and I couldn't help but laugh as he waddled across the lawn dragging the watering can. "This one's Grandpa's favorite color," he said, pointing to the deep orange bulbs. Was I corrected softly, then stopped myself? "No," I said. "You're right. Because that's the thing. No one tells you about grief. Sometimes the people we lose still show up. In flickering lights, in forgotten drawings, in the way a child remembers what color tulips a man once stopped to admire." Later that evening, I found myself reorganizing the kitchen. Not because I needed to, because it felt like something he would have done, something that made space. I opened the old cabinet where Dad kept his tool manuals and paperwork and found a manila envelope I had missed. Unmarked, thin. Inside was a photograph. It was of me, 16 years old, hair in a messy ponytail, sitting at this very kitchen table surrounded by books and notebooks mid-laugh. Dad must have taken it without me knowing. On the back in his handwriting, "She doesn't know it yet, but she's already stronger than I ever was." My hand went to my chest. The same ache, the same love. It was always there, waiting to be seen again. That night, after Caleb went to bed, I sat at the table with a cup of tea and no agenda. Just me, and the house, and the sound of rain against the roof. For the first time since this all began, I didn't feel like I had to guard anything. Not the deed, not the legacy, not even myself, because the war was over. Not with Ethan, but with memory, with fear, with the part of me that kept bracing for someone else to take something away. I was home, truly, finally, quietly. Home. Then I heard the steps. Soft. Careful. Caleb in his socks, holding a drawing in his hand. "I made this," he said. He handed me a piece of paper. 3 stick figures. One tall, one medium, one small, each standing under a roof, smiling. A heart floated above the house. "Who's this one?" I asked, pointing to the tallest. "That's Grandpa," he said. "And this, me. And me," he smiled. "You keep the light on." I didn't cry. I just pulled him into my arms and whispered, "So did he." After he went back to bed, I taped the picture to the fridge beside the old photograph of me that Dad had left behind. 2 generations. Same kitchen, same light. And I knew beyond any court, any trust, any fight, that the house was finally doing what it was built to do. Hold love. The first snowfall came early that year. I remember standing by the window, a steaming mug in my hand, watching the flakes fall gently over the porch and the old maple tree. Caleb had pressed his face to the glass eyes wide with wonder. "Do you think Grandpa sees it?" he asked, voice muffled. I smiled. "I think he never misses it." He nodded as if that were a perfectly reasonable answer, as if the boundary between heaven and home were no more than mist on a cold window pane. Life didn't go back to normal. It became something else. Honest, unvarnished, real. I enrolled Caleb in the local school, the same one Ethan and I once attended. He joined the art club and made friends faster than I expected. Every day after school, he ran into the house yelling, "I'm home," like the walls themselves needed to hear it. I let the garden go wild for a while. Not because I didn't care, but because I was learning to live in the house instead of just defending it. I started repainting the walls, not to erase the past, but to write a new chapter over it. I left the attic untouched, though. That space was still Dad's, still sacred. Sometimes I went up there just to sit in his old chair, notebook in my lap, letting the silence settle around me like a blanket. That's where I started writing this story. Not for a blog, not for court, for me, for Caleb, for the people who come after. Ethan never came back to the house. But he did write again once a few weeks later. It wasn't dramatic. No grand apologies or confessions. Just a postcard. Tell him I'm proud of him. Tell him I'm trying. That's all. And honestly, that was enough. Because at some point you stop needing people to undo the damage. You just want them to stop causing more. One evening, while organizing the bookshelf, Caleb brought over a photo album he'd found in the closet. We sat on the floor and flipped through it together. Page after page of birthdays, camping trips, pancake breakfasts. A lifetime of small, unremarkable moments that somehow meant everything. Then he turned to a photo of Ethan holding me on his shoulders, both of us laughing wildly in the middle of a sprinkler spray. "Were you happy here?" Caleb asked. I looked down at the photo, and without hesitation I said yes, even when I didn't know it. He nodded. Me too. And that's when I realized this house had become his story too. Not inherited, not gifted, grown. I made a decision that night. I sat down with Carol and filed the paperwork to update the trust. Not to lock it down, to expand it. The Hart Family Trust now included a clause for future guardianship. And in it I added one line: "This home shall remain in the care of those who love it, not by blood but by truth." Because truth in the end was the only inheritance that mattered. The kitchen light flickered again the night I signed the papers. Just once. A pulse. A wink. A father's final nod from somewhere between memory and electricity. And I whispered, "Thank you, not just for the house, but for the grace to make it whole again."